Okay, today we are going to demystify IC10 programming in Stationeers. So what I want to do is put together a few episodes to try and help people get into IC programming. IC programming really unlocks a lot of Stationeers, and there's a lot of cool automations you can do with it, and it's actually not that complicated. So yeah, I really just want to teach people sort of like the basics and try and get everyone using IC10. So to start with IC10, you do need a few things. So you do need an IC housing, which is like I guess the computer which is going to run the program. You need an integrated circuit chip, which is what has the program on it, and we need an IC editor motherboard so that we can actually write the script. Plus obviously a computer. So we put that in there. So we've got the editor, and we put the program in the chip, and that's sort of what we need. So to get started with IC10, you need like solder and electrum. So it's a little bit like you can't just get it immediately from the start. It takes a little bit of prep to get it done. But what we want to do in this example is we basically want to turn on this light. So normally, obviously, you can turn on lights like this, but you can also control this logic through IC10 and also through logic chips. So to start with, we'll actually do this, but using the logic chips, just to sort of give you, you know, actually we might try doing it. Might try doing it at the same time. Okay, so effectively what we want to do, this is like a very basic circuit. So what we want to do is we want to read the state of this lever. So when the lever is on, we want the light to turn on, and when the lever is off, we want the light to turn off. So this is a pretty simple circuit, and which we'll get set up using the logic chips. But let's just go into the integrated circuit, and let's just start a very basic program. So in IC10, I would recommend sort of breaking your scripts into a few phases. One is define devices. One is define variables. And then one is main loop. So, and if we do start, and we do jump start. So I think this is this is like your starting framework for an IC10 circuit. Defining devices. What defining devices is we're going to define the devices that we connect to this chip via these screws here. So that's what devices are. With variables, so variables are sometimes you need to read a value from an object. If you read a value from an object, you've got to store it somewhere. And so we want to store it into a variable so it makes sense to us what it is. And then the main loop is what this basically does is this is just a placeholder. This can be anything. This can literally be like, monkey. And if we jump to monkey, this would be a main loop as well. But I think for basics, let's just leave it as start. So what this will do is, so this is just a variable lane, a variable name called start, and code executes from the top down, and then when it gets to this line here, this means jump to start. So it's basically going to come down here, hit this line that says jump to start, and then it's going to jump back up to start, and then it's going to come down here and go jump to start, right? So what we want to do is we want to put stuff that yeah, we want to put our main program inside this loop. Is basically what we want to do. So, and the only additional thing, actually, we'll about that later. Okay, so that is like that's a basic shell for a script, right? Now, what we'll do is we'll make this work for both the logic chips and the IC10 circuit. So if we were doing this via logic chips, right? We have a logic reader here. So if we want to read this value here on the lever, the first thing we need to do is we need to make the logic reader, we have to make it read the device called lever, right? So we make this line up with the lever, and then the variable that we want to read is open, right? So if we turn this on now, so we are reading the open value on the lever, and so currently it's at 0. Now if we open up this lever, you can see that the current state changes to 1, right? Now let's do that same thing. Let's do that same thing, but in IC10. So in IC10, right? So we have to, the first thing we need to do is define a device. So we're going to, devices, actually I can put it here. Define devices, right? It goes from D0 to D5. And define variables is R0 to R15. Oops, R15. So define devices. So what we want to do is we want to write, so alias. So we want to give this device a name. So the name we want to give this device is lever. And the place we want to connect this lever to is in D0. Right, so if we have a look at this, right, we turn this on. So if we look at the D0, actually, sorry, we haven't exported. We'll get to the export. So as you can see, this now says we need to connect a lever to this pin, which is, as you can see, device 0. So to do that, we just, exactly the same as this logic chip here, we just got to turn this until we get to lever, right? So the lever is allocated to the lever, which is the same as what we do here, right? We connect the lever to this in variable. Now, so the logic reader currently, this is reading the value. This is reading the value from the lever. So how do we do that? Well, the first thing we need to do, because we're reading a value from a device, we need a place to store the value. So what are we going to call it? Maybe we'll just call it, we'll call it on, right? So we alias, what's the value going to be called? We're going to call it on. And where we're going to store it, we're going to store it in R0, right? So when it's blue, this is just a variable. So this isn't something you have to connect to the chip. This is just an internal variable. So now that we've got a variable, now we've got to mimic the behavior of the logic reader actually reading the lever. So the way we do that, there's a very simple command called, so what we want to do, we want to read the value of open to the on variable. Alright, so we want to load, and where do we want to save the variable? We want to save the variable into on. I mean, actually, this should probably be open, really. Right, to the open variable, and the device we want to read from is the lever, and the logic type that we want to read from. Now we do know it's open, but just to sort of show how you do this is just you press F1, which brings up this. You search for lever, right? You click on the lever, And these logic options are these are the ones that are available to you. So we want to read the open value. So here we just type in open. And what this has now done is it's read from the lever, it's read the open logic type from the lever, and it's saved it into open. So although we can't really easily test this or show this, you just have to trust me at this stage that this line here, L open lever open, is the same as setting up this chip here. Right, so the next step, if we actually want this flashing light to react, like to turn on when the lever is open, what we need to do is we actually need to do a writer to it. So a logic reader will just read a value. A logic writer actually writes a value. So what the input for this logic writer is going to be the actual logic reader chip. So in this case, we're going to do the logic reader. And the output device we want to do is the flashing light, and the sort of variable that we want to, like if you just click on here, the variable that we want to use is on. But again, if we press F1 and we type, you know, flashing light, these are the various values that we can, or logic types that we can use. So we clearly, the one that makes sense here is on, right? And so if we turn this on now, so because the lever is open, the flashing light is on. If we turn the lever off, the flashing light is off, right? So this is a pretty straightforward circuit. Now, so let's mimic this same behavior here, this logic writer behavior. So if we come into our IC script, so if you want to write a variable, you use the save command, which is S. So we want to, but first we need to define our device, right? So right now we only know about the lever. What we want to now know is we want to find out, well, we want the light. So we alias the light, and we have to, D0 is already taken, so we change this to D1. Right? So if we confirm that. Now you've got to export it to move it from the computer to this housing. But now if we put our cursor over the D1, you can see that it says it wants a light, because that's the alias that we gave it. So we want to change this to be flashing light. Alright, so there you go, flashing light. So now that we've defined the light as the device 1, we don't need any additional variables. So what we want to do is we want to save. So the device that we want to modify or write to is called the light, and the logic type that we want to do. So if you remember, so the flashing light, the logic type is this one. So we want to do on. Right, so you go here and we type on. And the value that we're going to use is we're going to use this variable here. So whatever the value of open is, we want to save to the light. So if we confirm that, and then we export it, right? This IC script is now doing the same thing as this logic writer. Now, obviously the logic. So firstly, let's turn the IC chip off. Now, so this is just using the logic circuits here. Right. Now if we turn off these two logic chips, this will not work. So nothing's working now because the logic chips are turned off. And if we turn on the IC housing now and we open up the lever, it's now working, right? Because the IC chip actually is doing the same thing as these logic writers and logic readers. So and it's because it loops. Now if we don't loop, right, so if we don't loop, the thing actually doesn't work, right? Because without the loop, it runs once. As soon as you export it, it runs, and then and then that's it. It's done. So the lever wasn't in the right state, so yeah, it doesn't happen. Whereas what we want to do is every cycle we want to keep reading what the lever state is, and we want to keep writing it to the light. So we confirm that, we export, and we go back to everything working. Right. So this is a basic. So this script here is a basic script that just is very like it just mimics the the logic chips that we have over there to basically read the value of a lever and turn a light on and off. But this is sort of like your basic script structure that will continue through the episodes. So we'll define our devices, we'll define our variables, and then we'll define our loop. Yeah, so this is basic. This is a basic light turning on script to replace a logic reader and logic writer for this setup. So that's it for episode 1, entry level IC. Look out for episode 2 where we'll start doing a bit more advanced stuff.